Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Flexi webinar. My name's Bennett. I'll be the moderator for today. Our presenter is Aron Clapp, application specialist at SAI. He knows everything there is to know about Flexi, and today he'll be walking us through some of the great things you can do with text in Flexi. After the presentation, we'll be able to answer any questions you have, either about working with text or any other Flexi topics, so feel free to put those questions in the chat and we'll answer as many as we can. We are recording the webinar as always, so if you want to review anything Aron discusses or share it with someone else, we'll be sending you all the link here this afternoon, so look out for that in your emails. And that's about it from me, so I'll turn the presentation over to Aron.
All right, sounds good. So this year we kind of wanted to go back and just look over some of the topics that maybe we don't talk about that often. And the text tool is kind of one of them. There's a lot you can do with the text tool and different things like that, different options, different settings, kind of what they do. So, you know, it's kind of a flexible tool and it can offer a lot of different solutions. And we thought we'd kind of walk through some of the things you can do with the text tool here today. So as I pull out my text tool here, so I can left click and hold, then I can pop out my little text tool. These are kind of your basic text settings that you're going to encounter. As always, you're probably going to want to have your Design Central open. And if you want to change the color of your text, you're probably going to want to open up your fill stroke editor, because this will even give you some additional options for your text. So you can change color, change your stroke width, and do kind of some other interesting things with strokes and transparencies and color and whatnot here. So these will be two of the toolbars you'll typically have open when you're working through it, although the main settings and configurations will all be done in Design Central. So we can click on the text tool, and this is, you know, fairly simple here. But, you know, here at the top, we can select the type of text we want, which this is a list of fonts that you've installed in your computer. Now, just briefly, because I know this question will probably come up, you know, where do we install fonts in Flexi? Well, that's a really good question. There's several places that you can install fonts. If you have some really old fonts back from the Casmate days, there's a folder inside of Flexi that you can actually install those into. And so that's located on your C drive. And we'll go to our program files here. We'll find our SAI folder. And any of the folders are fine, so it doesn't matter. I've got a lot of installs, but you pick one or whichever one you have, 21, 19, and the folders are going to be the same. But if you have some old Casmate folder of fonts, you'll input them into this Cas fonts folder right here. And so if you had fonts from the old Casmate days, this is where you'd install those. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to go to your local C drive, this PC, C drive, and then go to the Windows folder. And inside of Windows, there's a folder called Fonts. You can actually double-click this, and you can drag and drop fonts right into this folder, and it will install them for you. Or if you download a font from, say, like Sign Design Elements or some other place, and you just have like one or two that you need to install, you can actually just double-click on the font, and that'll actually install it as well. So obviously, if you have, you know, like 300 fonts that you want to install, you're probably not going to want to double-click each one of them. So dragging and dropping them into this folder will work. And the cool thing about this is that when you install fonts here, you'll get a little message in Flexi that says, hey, there's new fonts. Do you want to reload those fonts? Hit yes, and boom, those fonts will pop up in here immediately. You don't have to restart the program. You don't have to do anything like that to get new fonts in. It's just like that. They'll just pop in. In Design Central, you have a lot of your basic settings here, some of which can also be found under the text menu, but we'll get into the text menu here in a minute. So we've got things like, let's change the size of our font. So we've got 3-inch letters here. Oop, 21. And we can adjust this stuff. So if I highlight my text here, I can change, depending on the font might support several different types. You've got bold, italic, and whatnot. So we can set those here. Regular, if it has underscore or underline, things like that, those options would appear here. Here's the size of my font, so the size of the letters. This is your character width scale. So I can scale up the width of my characters a little bit if I want to. By default, this is always set to 100%. That's just the default for the text. So if your text is doing something weird, and this has actually happened before, where your font is getting like squished or something like that, what can actually happen is you can actually get a problem where your letters are stacking on top of each other. So check that. Should always be 100%, or unless you set it to something else. Then we've got our tilt. So if here's something that's kind of cool. If your font doesn't support italics, you can actually create your own italics right here. And of course, this can be used to create several different effects, but that's kind of a nice thing is you can do forward or reverse italics. So kind of a nice little option there. This one here is a tracking or a spacing. So it's kind of almost like kerning, but a slightly different. It changes the tracking between the letters and individually spaces them out so it's kind of even. So it's kind of a nice setting to have there. And then this here is a setting for above the line or below the line. So this is really actually helpful when you're using text on an arc or text on a path. So let's just say, for example, we're doing text on an arc. And I do, right? So we got Flexi 21, and let's highlight this. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. Let's highlight this text. And then if I go back in here, I can decide how far above or below the line I want it to go. So this kind of pushes it up or above the line so that if I have something on text on an arc or text on a path, I can adjust the sizing however I want that up and down so that I can have the text above or below by a very accurate setting here. Now, we do have settings in here for the arc, and we'll talk about these here in a second, but let's just talk about this one here. Again, real easy. These are kind of settings that are very common in most text applications. So you've got your justify left, center, or right. Let's go over here. I've got some text down here in a paragraph. So I can pull that up and say, let's click on our text tool here and highlight this. So I can highlight, and then I can adjust my formatting here just like you would any other way. Or I can full justify, and if I choose my full alignment options, this gives me a bunch of more options to deal with. So I can choose what is the width of the character box that I want it to fit inside of. So this is, I have it set to 15.18. I've also got some options here where I can say character and word spacing. I want to adjust the word spacing only. I want you to only change the character size or the width or the character size. So you can make an adjustment because obviously when I do this, it does stretch out your text. And you can kind of see what it does. It does a combination of different things in order to get to so it's full justified, right? So you can have it adjust the size of the text or increase it or kind of do different things like that. So one of the other things we can do is this box, I can either define it here by clicking full justify, and I can say I need you to fit it to the width and fit it that way. I can do it this way, or when I click on my text tool, I can left click and hold and drag, and this will create a boundary box where my text is going to wrap to. So if I start typing, this will automatically wrap the text for me within this boundary. So this is kind of nice to have if you're typing up some text and you need it to stay confined and you don't want to necessarily hit the return button every time you get to the end with, say, you have larger letters and things like that, that makes it kind of easy for that sort of thing. So drag and drop, or drag and click allows you to define those boxes that way. All right, so one of the things you will notice too is that when I click on text, all the settings pop up here. This is something that's pretty common to text. Now, if your text gets converted to outlines, for example, let's just take this text and I believe it is convert to outlines. This is no longer a font anymore. It's no longer text. It's just an object or whatnot. So when I click on it now versus clicking on this one, some of those text options no longer appear. So just be aware of that. If it's no longer text or considered text, then it's, you just get sizing options. You'd have to retype it or do something like that. So that's something to be aware of there. We've got text on an arc. We kind of showed you that here. If we click on that and then we go to the Design Central, we've got all kinds of settings about like what we want the diameter of our circle to be. We've got our angle here. And then we have also options for above text, below. So if we make our 10 inches, I can start typing in some text here. And let's move this over just a little bit. Whoops. Yeah, let's move it down here a little bit and kind of zoom in. So now I can come in here and I can say different things like I want to define how I want it to be typed. So I can go below, above. I can also do this here, or I can say first line below. Now you'll notice that when it does this, it kind of tries to put it in the middle, but this is where you can always come back here and make some further adjustments to this. So I can say, I want it better like this, or perhaps I only want it somewhat. So this is where you can kind of play with both of those settings to kind of get the right deal. But this will allow you to center the text at least initially, and then you can go back and make some adjustments later. Things like that. So the degrees, this is kind of where it decides it's going to start on the circle. So by default, it starts at the top or the center of the circle. And then also it starts typing down the circle. So it starts at the 90-degree mark. So I can choose where it starts. So 170 degrees is down here. And as we type, that will go that direction. Now, obviously, you can also type words backwards when we look at our paragraph. So I can do that, or I can even change my justification, and that will also kind of have an effect on the angle as to where it starts and things like that. So be aware of that when you type. It starts at 90 degrees, but depending on what you have set for your justify, that might help. So again, these are paragraph settings, so we can have our text type forward or backwards. Or I can switch it to backwards, and it will type slightly differently. So it's maintaining where it's not typing the text backwards per se, but it's changing the orientation of where it's going from. So instead of starting here and moving to the right, as we move across like this, our cursor moves this way. In this particular instance, our cursor stays the same. So again, this might be actually helpful when you're typing on like on a line or something like that, and it's particular that you want your cursor to keep staying in this position, then you might switch it to this mode. Here we've got word spacing. for spacing between just words. This is helpful if you want to differentiate your spacing between words versus letters. And then we have our tab distance. One of the things that you can also do, and this is kind of one of those features that's kind of nice to have when you're previewing fonts, and sometimes it's not always super obvious, but you can highlight the text just like this, and then if I put my mouse and just hover over the text, I don't click it, I just roll my mouse, I can scroll through all of our different fonts. So if you're looking for, you know, a specific font, or maybe you don't have a specific font maybe in mind, and you're just looking for an appearance or something like that. I can keep scrolling and scrolling, and this way, this allows me to do whatever I want and find, oh, hey, I like this one. This kind of matches my aesthetic. We'll just leave it at that. So that's kind of a nice little option to have, and you can preview as much text, because I'll be honest, sometimes this preview here is not always the best preview. I mean, it's okay, but sometimes you like to see like a broader scope of what you're actually seeing. So for example, I can highlight that entire paragraph, and as I scroll through, it's going to change the font, and I can see what that entire paragraph is going to look like as I scroll through my different fonts. So this is kind of nice because I can do this on a much larger scale. And this makes things a little bit easier in that regard. So that's kind of a quick tip there that is a nice thing to have. Now, let's highlight some of this and get it out of our way for a second here. Text on a path. These are, again, fairly simple options, but I can choose to type text on a path, and my cursor will change once I've reached a path. So I can click on this, and based on the settings that I've chosen, which I should probably go back in here and take a look at, see, we're all good there. So paragraph, we want to do it this way, justify to the left. That sounds good. Oop. I think I have messed up some settings here. There we go. I need to click on the flip font there. Now it's going to keep following this text as I write this text. Let's make this font a little bit smaller. Let's go down to 0.5-inch text here. All right. So one thing too is perhaps maybe I don't necessarily think that this is I don't want to sit here and mess around with numbers and calculations in here and get it just right. Or maybe I have no idea what's going to look good. So sometimes I can just click on the text and say, you know what, let's just get the text on there, and then we can adjust it later. So if I do that, I exit my text tool. So I've typed this up, I've selected it with my selection tool. And now if I go to the character text, you'll notice that a bunch of stuff pops up here. This allows me to change stuff like kerning or text spacing or letter spacing, kind of in a more visual way. So these are the same settings that you can find here. So tracking here, and things like that. So for example, I can just now grab this and stretch it over this space like this, and I think that's great. Then that way I don't have to know what the size of text I need or what spacing I need in order to get that correct the first time. I can also come in here and I can make individual changes to some of these letters. Let's say I really don't like the spacing of the I and the S, but I don't really want to change, you know, the spacing of the rest of it. Well, I can come in here and I can move this character and I can move it back. Say I like it right there. That's a little more realistic. So I like this, and so I'll keep it that way. Or I could even go as far as grabbing the circle above, and I could do some cool effects with the letters and just make that one fall down. Or I can rotate this letter as much as I want. So you got a few different options here for this particular character that you can set. I can also grab this end and I can move it along. So now the tracking adjusts the spacing. So let's say I like the spacing like this, and we'll put our S back. And maybe we'll zoom in here so we can kind of grab that little dot, put this guy back to the way it was. And let's say I like the spacing here, but I want it moved down the line. So now all I do is I grab this and I can scooch it down, and now I can get it right in the perfect spot for where I want it to be. So this is kind of a nice visual way to edit this stuff. So if it's not necessarily super important, the spacing in terms of numbers, you can kind of come in here and do some visual changes as well. Again, we can move, these individual characters along as much as we want, whatever the spacing, and it'll just move everything else out of the way, but maintain the spacing. So this is a really great way to make adjustments to your text kind of in a visual fashion. Then the nice thing about this is that once I'm done with this text, this line, I just delete the line and I have the text in the shape that I want it to. So it's not bound by the line, but I can certainly remove it and get rid of it so that I can have a clean design. So not to go too long, what I want to do is briefly, we'll mention that this is text, vertical text. So if I want to type vertical, this is a great way to do that. We've got options for vertical text. And then if you want to do the same function on a line, I can do that too. So vertical text path tool is basically the same as your regular path text tool, except for the text is vertical like this. So these are all the options that are in Design Central. Now we also have a ton of options inside of our text menu. So we can highlight our text here, and we can go down to our text menu, and you've got a ton of stuff. Now, some of this stuff is overlapping, so there's going to be some duplicate information here. So like font size, your style of font. So for example, what's really cool about the font is I can now, choose right from here my different options. I can do my justification here. I could do some stuff with find and replace. If you have if you have a big paragraph, you can also do spelling. And then I can also do some unique things like if I want to toggle everything to lowercase, or if I want to, change it to sentence case. So this is kind of a cool, neat thing that you can do. Gives you some options for changing wide scale all of your text. And then you got your options for kerning. So here we have a few different options for kerning. So we've got narrow, medium. So let's hit narrow, and it pulls them together a little bit tighter. So you can change these kerning options, or if you really want to, you could just go ahead and define your own kerning. So I can click on here, and I can say, where I want to store this kerning, if this is what I want it to be the default, or only for this document, or only for this selection. Maybe we'll do this selection only. And then I can adjust my kerning here to whatever I want, this to be. So, and this is in EMs. And I can click OK, and it'll adjust that kerning for me. So you can customize your kerning. You can also define a character. This one's a little bit on the strange side, but what this allows you to do is change a character from one thing to another. So I can say every time I type the letter A, it's going to do something else. So let's say maybe when I type the letter K or the letter A, it's going to type out a B. Or maybe it's a special character that you particularly want to use, or that you use frequently, like some kind of a unique special character that you always use. It would be good to put that here. Or if you want to assign it like a double A or a double letter or something like that, that's also an option. You can apply it, and then you can always go back in there and delete it once you're done with that document, or if you're no longer going to use that anymore. So that's kind of a neat thing that you can do there. We also have options for breaking apart text. So this could be helpful as well if you have paragraphs. So one thing to note about our break apart text is if you have, let's actually type up two sets of text here. So let's just say, I think this is, what did I set this to? Is this 1 inch? Okay, yeah, let's do 1 inch. So they're about the same. All right, we'll leave it there. So we'll just leave it there. Just, we don't need to type the whole thing. If you used, if you typed it up like this, where I just hit enter every time I wanted a break in the text, if I click break apart and then go back, now it'll split the lines into individual sections. So now I could make changes to this text separately from the rest of it. Now, if I go a step further and highlight everything again, and I say break apart, now everything is broken apart into its individual characters. So this is kind of nice if you want to make changes to an individual character like this, or something like that. That's something you can do here as well. One thing to note, if you, because this question has come up a couple times in the past, if you type up a paragraph like I did, like here, using the method where I drag the box like this, and then I start typing, these are natural text breaks. And so if I click break apart on my text, it goes straight to breaking apart the individual letters. So just something to know about text in that way. If you hit the return button, it'll return it for you, and it'll break it up apart into each line. But if you use the paragraph function here, where it automatically tabs for you, when you hit the break apart, it'll just break everything apart for you. You can also go back and then join them back together. So once you've done your changes and you like the way that it is, you can join that. Well, probably shouldn't have that happen. Wow, something happened there. Yikes. Okay, well, what happened? Well, that got all mixed up. I'm going to have to probably report that. That's weird. Let's see what happens when we do it to our text up here. Nothing like finding a bug in a webinar, right? So let's join these together. Okay, well, we apparently have a bug with the join thing. So we're going to report that and make sure that that's fixed. So anyway, the point is you could join it together, but we'll make sure and fix that for sure. That's definitely an issue. That's always fun. All right, so then you got some other stuff here like inserting symbols. This is for special characters, things like that. So if I come in here and say insert symbol, I can go in here and pull this up without having to try and figure out what the special keybind is for that particular letter, because some of them are weird. You have to hit like Option, Control, and Shift, and then hit the letter 1, and then, or the number 1, and then it pops up with a special character. None of that nonsense. You can just insert a symbol right here, and I can get whatever I need. So especially if you're typing in a different language or something like that. Text spacing, again, this is kind of very similar to the setting that's in here for text spacing. Just be aware it's in a dialog box where it allows you to kind of set some of those things with a few additional options. So you can have it set to do proportional and whatnot. The last thing we kind of want to talk about also is going to be our options for Braille. So we've got Braille. We've got all kinds of options in here for text. So we've got Braille. So if I click on text to Braille, where let's grab this guy since it's joined together still. So I can switch this to Braille, except for I can't because it's in a, I believe it's because it's in that form. It's not going to let you. So that's okay. I don't think Braille can be placed that way anyway. So that's probably a good idea that it won't let you do that. There we go. So we can switch it to Braille. We've got grade 1, grade 2. We also have the option for the California standard, things like that. You also have different forms. So you can choose the diameter of your Braille here. And then you can also tell it whether you want it to fill it like this, or if you're going to do it for a laser, different things like that. It kind of just changes the way that everything is set. And then if you want to, you can always just change it back to text. So with that little button that's down there. Again, we have all kinds of stuff in here. These are kind of cool. We've actually done, I think I've done videos about these in the past, but barcode, QR code, data matrix, things like that. They're all things that you can do. You can type in text, websites, email addresses, anything like that. And you can set it to a data matrix code or a QR code, something cool like that. It actually is really neat to use this kind of stuff in your designs. So you can scan a phone or a web address. So it's really, really nice that way. And then you don't have to have it listed out in text format. So it's a good way to hide, especially if you have a lot of text that you want to maybe hide or you don't necessarily want, or if you want to attach your website to something without having your www dot all over your design. This is a really good way to do that as well. Again, this is text orientation, so I can flip my orientation here from vertical to horizontal, which you can also do right here. So this is your text orientation right here. Again, that's just a repeated setting. And then if you have styles that you particularly like to use, and this is this includes kerning, spacing, the type of font that you use, the size of the font, everything, whether you're using italics or not, anything that you put in here. So justification, whatever that text, all the properties of that text, you can also store in a style. So if this is a style or something that you use frequently, you can copy the style, you can store it. If I say store, I can pull it up here, give it a name, save it, and then pull up a different style. I can hit apply style, and then this will give me my list of styles that I've saved, and you can pull those up and easily apply the same style to multiple texts that maybe are in different locations in the design, but you want to have it available as the same exact style without having to go through Design Central and make all those settings done all over again. So that's kind of a nice tool there. So so this is kind of your text tools. There's a lot here. You can honestly sit around and play with this for hours on end, kind of just seeing what this stuff could do. There's a lot of options in here for text, a lot of great tools for getting just what you need. Design Central is going to be your go-to place. This is typically where you're going to find all this information in kind of a concise format. So that's really nice to know. And then usually you're going to have your advanced options under the text menu here. So take a look at this. Let's see if we've got any questions for me. I know this is kind of seems like a basic topic, but sometimes it's nice to just run through it and see, because you might find something that you didn't know before. Probably out of this whole group, my favorite feature is highlighting the text and then changing my font like this. I think this is great. So it's kind of a cool thing to do. So let's see what we got for questions, and then go from there.
Yes, we had a couple questions throughout, so I'm going to go back a little bit and work our way to the most recent. Derek had a question that Tanya actually answered, but it might be nice if you could just demonstrate it really quickly. He was wondering how you arc the text on the bottom of the arc. You were doing it over the top, but he wanted to know how to do it on the bottom also.
Yeah, so let's see here. So if we do text on an arc, the easiest way to do that, and okay, my workspace is getting a little dirty here. Let's just delete all that. All right, so if we want to do the bottom here, when you click on text on an arc, it automatically takes you to this tab because it's kind of the more relevant tab, right? So what you can do then is you can switch it to the bottom. And here's where I can set my justification to center. Oops, I don't want that. I don't want to change that setting. Okay, let's try that again. So justification center, and I can go like this, and then I can either change it like this or above the line like that. So I've got several different options there. Or, you know, if you want it below, we've got there. So that's one way of doing it for sure. If you're not using this particular option, like you're using the path text tool, let's see here. Let's just draw a path. So I'm going to click on my path text tool, click here. You also have the options right here. So for example, you got to be real accurate here. You can't just willy-nilly click anywhere. All right, so if I'm doing this like this, I can now flip this text upside down to the bottom side of this. If I do that, I'm probably going to want to change that's more of a flipping tool, but this is probably where I would want to use this setting instead, actually. There we go, like that. Put that underneath there, but you can also flip it, so that's another option.
All right. Next one was from Rick. I believe it was when you were you had text on sort of that wavy path that you had created, and you were moving it up and down the line. He was asking, can you enlarge the first letters and still adjust the length on the drawn path?
So let's see here. So if I go back to text on a path and I come in here, so I can adjust this here. Sizing, I cannot adjust at the moment. This is a spacing sort of thing only. So no, it won't let me adjust size, but what I would do is I would probably grab this, break it apart, and then grab this individual letter and resize it individually compared to the rest of the file. Although, let's go back a couple steps here. Let's click here. Let's go to, I thought I saw some options in, and that might have been, yeah, okay, so it doesn't really, there was a setting I was thinking about. I think it was in my paragraph justification. So I think that's what that was. Hold on. Each paragraph. Anyway, somewhere in here I saw an option where if you wanted to make the first letter big, and I think it's in one of these options for paragraphing, I think, but I can't seem to find it. So, but no, you'd have to, my option would be, I would just break it apart and then edit the size of that object individually.
Tanya just commented saying, if you highlight just the first letter, then you can adjust size in Design Central.
That is true. Yep, that is true. You can just highlight that individual letter. That is correct. That's true. That is another way to do that, yeah. That would work.
Okay, and then we're going to move to some questions that came in after you were finished. Renee was the first one. How do you find and import Adobe Filters for editing text? And she's asking in order to add shadowing and embellishing.
You know what? I don't think that they're, well, okay. So for text, I don't think that there is a way. Now we do have our own options for things like shadows or distortion of text, and also outlines. So you can create a lot of this stuff, for example, like a shadow, whatnot here. I don't know of a way that we can bring in Adobe style shadowing and stuff here in this particular scale or case. Now, I do know that you can import bitmap filters. So I can install Adobe Filters, and here's where those go. And it used to always be that you had to download the 32-bit version, but now in the newest version of Flexi, if you're running Flexi 21, it's 64-bit. So now you can download the 64-bit versions of the Adobe Filters. And if we go into our C drive, well, here's what you could do. And go into Program Files, SAI. I'm going the long way around because I don't have, my desktop doesn't show the icons that I have on the desktop. So if we go to Flexi, why are they all, oh, you know what? I got to go to regular Program Files because that's where all my 64-bit stuff is. Okay, 21. Right here, Adobe plugins. So you'll drop in your Adobe plugins here. And then what this will allow you to do is it does allow you to edit bitmaps and things like that. So, and add filters to bitmaps. So what I've actually seen people do is they'll select something, they'll come in here, convert this to a bitmap, a really high quality bitmap, and then apply your Adobe filters this way. And then you can create stuff like emboss and some of the Adobe filters once it's converted to a bitmap. So that way would be the way to do it. I want to say I have a video on my YouTube channel on how, or on my YouTube channel, on the YouTube channel, the SAI YouTube channel, that tells you how to install these and then kind of what you can do with them and things like that. We've done several webinars and videos on that. So if you look on our YouTube channel, you should be able to find something like that.
Right. Derek had a question. He's saying he's looking to make adjustments to individual letters, serifs, for example.
Okay. That's probably where, in this particular case, so, you know, for example, if we wanted to change well, there's one of two ways that you can do this, right? The easy way is to convert this to an outline, so it's no longer a font anymore. And then I can come in here with my point editing tool, and now I could come in here and adjust the points however I want them to be. So if I want to adjust my, you know, my serifs and stuff like that, that would be the way to do that individually. Now, if you have a bunch of text, that's obviously not ideal. So that would be where you probably have to create your own font, make the adjustments that are needed, and then bring that font into Flexi. That's probably your other bet in that scenario, other than just adjusting it that way, because there's nothing really in Flexi that allows you to adjust the serifs or the attributes of the font itself. The characters are what they are, and the only way to modify those would be to adjust the font itself, which you can't really do in Flexi.
Okay, and then next question is from Crystal. Can you shape a font, like turning a C into a crescent shape?
You could probably use some, so let's just type up something here. You can obviously, if you type up some text, click on the selection tool, and then you can stretch and do all sorts of things to text, like this, adjustments and sizing that way. And you can also then do things like, where was our distort So I can go into my distort menu and I can start to distort things kind of like this. So I can, do something like this or create custom effects like that. If I click here, which this is kind of something that I'm having our development look at, but when I click on this button, it doesn't show for you guys. It shows up on another screen. This is something that we're going to have fixed, but I can choose several different options. So like for example, here, I changed it to this, and now I can do, something like that to my text. Or if I go back into distort, you've got all kinds of different options. I can flip, I can rotate, I can do wavy letters like this. So kind of like a banner kind of style. And then if I hit Control, on some of these, if you hit Control, it'll actually allow you to do them individually. So I'm going to do the left side, separate from the left. So the Distort tool would probably be what you're looking for. If the Distort tool doesn't cover what you want to do, again, you'd probably just go back to the Convert it to Strokes, and then you can manipulate the points in whatever way that you want once you convert it to an outline. So now I can come in here and add additional points if I want to, or make changes to points and move them around and make individual or macro adjustments or micro adjustments to text that way if I really needed to do something kind of unique to one particular character.
All right, and then you kind of answered the next question, which Tanya already gave an answer to. Thanks, Tanya, for answering some questions in the chat for other people here. Darren was asking, how do you make text wavy? To which Tanya responded using the Distort tool, which you just covered.
Yep.
Renee says, not necessarily a text question, but why can't you use a transparent in a gradient? If I want an object, picture, shape, or text to fade to the background, this would be so much easier than any alternative method I've found. How would you recommend doing it now?
So, so going from one color to like an invisible color is what, or whatever it is. That is something that the only thing we can do, well, if we go to a gradient, unfortunately, we can't go to a transparent gradient. So when we choose, if I hit advanced here and I pull up this menu, we have to choose a color, and transparent really is not an option. It's there, but it doesn't allow me to click on it. The software here doesn't allow us to go from a color to a transparency like that. I can go to white, but unfortunately, I know your question, and that's not going to solve it. So I don't have a really great way to do that other than yeah, I don't have it, because even like our transparency, so if I decide to apply some kind of a opaqueness, it doesn't do it in a global fashion. So for example, if I hit 10% here, it does it to the whole thing, not to individual, not like in a gradient. So it's not starting strong and then moving to transparent. So unfortunately, that is kind of a feature request that I know has come up before, and we've requested it. So I will add this to the list again of things that I follow up on in terms of like with development. But I don't know of a good way to do a transparency like that I'm assuming that you're talking about, where it goes from a solid color slowly to a transparent color.
Barb had maybe a suggestion for that. Would using white and then a lens work for the transparent text?
That's possible. Although the only thing with that would be that when you apply a lens or a transparency, I don't think that you can do it in a progressive manner. Like I don't know of a transparency that will do more transparent on one end and less transparency on the other. So like a gradient, like a fade. So theoretically, yes, I guess you could, but I don't know that you'd be able to do it there. So it's kind of one of those things where no matter how you shake it, it just doesn't. We don't have the ability to do it at the moment. But it is a feature request that has come up quite a bit that I have kind of asked about. So it'll be something I can follow up with development on to see if they can. That could be a new feature for another new version in the future. Eye candy and alien skin. Those are some good Adobe filters that you can use to accomplish that. So it can technically be done through those filters, and those are alien skin and eye candy are typically the most popular ones, and they have a ton of stuff on that. Again, if you want to learn how to add those, I have a video on our YouTube channel that addresses how to install those and make sure you're getting them correct, and then even how to use them. I click on one and I do some changes, and you can see the preview. And so that would be one way that you could do it, is through outside plugins for bitmaps.
Right. Let's see. Barb has a question. Is there a way to add swashes or swirls to calligraphy fonts in text font selection?
Not in the text font selection, I don't think. Not that I know of. I mean, it's possible. There might be. You could possibly. I'm trying to think. There's nothing in the Distort tool that'll do that specifically. So that's a good question. I don't think there's anything inside of Flexi that could do that specifically. That might have to be something that's done inside the text, kind of like the editing the serifs and stuff like that.
Okay. Let's see. Crystal just has another question. I also have a problem with one of my files. When I export to PDF, it shows yellow and white, and the design is red and black. I have to export it in JPEG or other forms. What am I doing wrong?
Okay, so this is something that if you have the latest version of Flexi has come up. And this is actually comes as the folks that have complained about it the most are those that are exporting PDFs and then sending those PDFs to a customer who may or may not have Adobe. They may have some other program, or they may not even have a design application at all. So if you're using lab colors or certain, I think it's lab colors, in some cases, it can convert those lab colors to, well, no, it doesn't convert them. It keeps them as is. In the past, lab colors would get converted to, I think, either spot colors or their CMYK equivalent, and then they would get sent that way. The problem with that was that we were having printing problems. So in certain cases, if you used a lab color, it would get converted, and maybe you don't want it to do that conversion for you. You just want the RIP software to handle the lab color as is. So we removed that option. Well, then what happens is if you have a lab color in a PDF or another format, typically PDF, if you try to open it with like Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, or anything like that, basically an application that really doesn't have the robust PDF importing applicate or best solution, the colors would come out wrong. So in that case, basically, if you open up the file or you open up the PDF with Adobe Reader, then it's fine. It looks and appears correctly, but that's because Adobe Reader knows how to handle that. It knows how to handle a lab color because that's part of its job. Whereas import filters for Internet Explorer or Google Chrome or some kind of preview application. Like we had it happen to a guy with a Mac. We send him a PDF. He opens it up with a program called Preview. It shows the wrong color, but it's because their PDF importing algorithms aren't complex enough to support lab colors or these certain colors. And so basically what it come down to was they basically need to have a PDF viewer, Adobe PDF Acrobat Reader. And it's free. You can download it. Or if you don't want to have to tell your customer to do that, then switch it. You have to send the proof via JPEG or something like that. Hopefully that answers the question. If that's what it is referring to, but I think that's what you're referring to because it's come up recently quite a bit.
Yeah, it looks like you answered that.
If it's a previewing thing, the file is actually correct. It's just the program that's previewing it doesn't know how to handle that particular color, and so it just switches it for something else. Typically, you'll find that, like I said, in Adobe, or not Adobe products, but you'll find it in Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Firefox, or any kind of generic Windows preview application. Typically, those have that problem. So we made an improvement in order to make our printing better, but unfortunately, now that has an effect on those, which you should be able to export a JPEG or something like that for a proof and get a good enough quality to where they'll know what's going on.
Okay. Rick has a question. This might be our last one before we run out of time here. When an existing customer places a new order, how can I get their previously used information from the customer tab into the new job info being created? Copy and paste one at a time seems cumbersome.
Do you mean the job info from here? If you're referring to the job info from here, the answer to that question is, I hate to say it, but there's not an easy way. This is something we know about and that we are trying to figure out how to logistically address that issue. We know that this is a problem where you'd have to copy and paste the information in here or fill it out every single time. That's why it sometimes, like you said, it's cumbersome. It's really not that useful. For a one-off circumstance, sometimes it's nice, but we're trying to figure out a way that we can integrate that particular function, with maybe something like the cloud tool, not the archive to cloud, it's the approval tool, or something like that, where it could pull that information from another file or from a database or something like that that's stored inside the cloud or inside of Flexi or something like that. So unfortunately, the answer to that question is no, there's not a really good way, but it is something we are looking at and trying to figure out in terms of what's the best way to kind of make that user friendly without making it too complicated and weird. So yeah, that's definitely on the list of things for newer versions of Flexi. I don't know when, but it's,
Okay, and then we've got last question here from Crystal, a quick one. Can you have Flexi only on one device? I was trying to get on a tablet to try and draw. Is there a way that she can do that?
You can. You would need to release the license from the current install in order to install it somewhere else. Now, I've never actually tried it on a tablet before. The tablet would have to be running a full version of Windows, which those exist. I think the new the Surface Pro tablets from Microsoft, they run a full version of Windows and they have a touch screen and everything. There's also other kinds of companies that make tablets that run full versions of Windows. That would be the only caveat, is the tablet that you're running can't run iOS, and it can't be running some version of Android. It's got to be running and it can't be using a half-baked version of Windows either. In the past, some of the Microsoft Surface tablets, they used to use like a mobile version of Windows, that wouldn't work. It would just cause all kinds of problems. So if you have a tablet that runs a full version of Windows, yes, you can install it in there. You just have to remove the license from where it's currently installed. And then as for support with touch devices, we don't really have support for touch devices, but I've seen people use them before. So I don't think it would be an issue. It'd just be probably a matter of getting used to the way it interacts with the touch interface.
Yeah, and I'll just add, as Tanya just said, there's a limit to the number of times you can release the license onto a different device. So, and there's a reason for that. It's so that people aren't just sharing software with other people. So, as Tanya said, purchasing a separate design-only option of Flexi would be a good choice if you're looking to do that more than once. If it's a one-time thing and you're just trying to test out to see if you can draw on a tablet, yeah, you can just remove your license and install it on the other device. But yeah.
One last thing, and it's not really related to this, but any of you out there that you want to use a Mac, we also now have Flexi for Mac. So if you have a Mac and been wanting to use that instead of a PC, we now have Flexi Designer for Mac. So that is available to purchase. So if that's something you're interested in or know somebody who's interested in that, that is now a new product. So we've been working on that and just came out with it a couple weeks ago. So if you want to switch to a Mac, or at least partially, at least use your designer on a Mac, that's available.
Yep, like Aaron said, you can get that on our website. There's more information about it there as well. But for today, we're going to go ahead and close it out. Thanks, Aaron, for answering those questions, and thank you all for being a part of the chat and joining us for today. Our next Flexi webinar will be about using the point editing tools to clean up drawings. So that'll be a good one. That's a month from today on March 8th, and we hope to see you there. Make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter so you won't miss out on any webinar announcements, and you can sign up for that on our website. Thank you again for attending. We hope you learned something, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Have a great one.